there, this is the Student Theologian with yet another upload for you guys. I apologize for the tardiness of this upload. As you know, I try to upload my thoughts on every 2 weeks, and this one is, I think, is a month behind. Or not a month behind, it's 2 weeks behind. So I apologize for that, but we have a lot to talk about because the news has not been slowing down. Donald Trump and his administration and everything else along the geopolitical line does not slow down just because my life gets busy and I can't upload and talk about it. So I'm not going to be able to talk about everything that's been happening in current events, but there is a couple of topics I do want to talk about. I want to talk about an essay that I wrote and some other cultural issues that I want to speak on, as well as an apologetic section. But first, as I always do, I want to start out with some life updates. It's probably a good thing that I do life updates on these uploads because I have been so busy, haven't been able to write in my journal for the longest time. And as many women as I've been on dates with and have talked to, and that journal's got to be so outdated. But nevertheless, we're going to cover some life updates from me. The latest woman I was talking to didn't work out. Unfortunately, I think the distance was just too much of an issue for her. I'm going on another date this Saturday with someone who's a little bit closer, but quite a lot closer. So I hope that goes well. If you're one of those who prays, please pray for that to go well. She seems pretty interested in talking to me, at least online, so we'll see. I went to a singles mixer in Shelbyville, Kentucky, and I had a blast. The elders, one of them was an elder, one of them was a pastor, but the elder, he was very knowledgeable, said a bunch of great stuff that I agreed with, and one of the things that he said is his name is Tanner Cartwright, I think. I can't remember if he's a doctor or he's gotten his doctorate or what, but he's an elder there. And he said that we can't let women define what masculinity is, pretty much. He said that your definition of masculinity can't be a definition that your grandma can meet. Like, your definition of masculinity can't be, gentleness, meekness, loving. I mean, those are all good attributes to have as a man, but that doesn't define what being a man is. Being a man means being coarse, rough, strong, in a way that only men can be. And your grandma, women, can't be that, or they're not supposed to be that. And so that was eye-opening. I got to hear some really great sermons, lessons, got to meet and talk with some great people, made some good friends. I got a girl's phone number, but she wasn't interested, so I don't know what I'm doing wrong when it comes to dating, but I'm going to continue to press forward and blame women for all my problems. I'm kidding. I'm going to try and avoid that and try to just keep looking for the one God has for me. It is extremely hard and tempting as a single person to get jaded and bitter. And sometimes I give in to that stuff and post angry stuff on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or something. But we have to resist that temptation when it comes. And I have to do better at doing that. So I'll be trying to be less bitter and less jaded in the future. So that's some life updates, some stuff that I hope that God works on my heart with. I don't think I have any other life updates for you guys. I might be growing my hair out again, so we're going to see how that looks and how that goes. So the first thing I want to talk about is probably the number one thing that's been on the news lately is the Iran-Israel war. So it seems that there's been like two camps, people who go too strongly in defending Iran, this Islamic authoritarian dictatorship, and then there's people go on the completely opposite end of the spectrum who thinks that Israel can do no wrong, and that it's practically good for Israel to control our foreign policy. And I think both sides are wrong. I think we can agree that Judaism and Islam are both equally blasphemous religions that rebel against Christ and his will. They both reject who Christ is. I've recently talked to some Muslims again, and yeah, they're rejecting Christ and who he truly is, and they're lean very heavily into some bad apologetics on their part. They clearly have no understanding of what Christianity really is. They say, well, how could God die on a cross? Well, God did not die on a cross. The human nature of Christ died on the cross, while his divine nature stayed in control and ruling in control and having authority over the earth and the universe. Both those natures coexisted equally in the person of Jesus Christ, and the human nature of Christ was raised on the third day, where he conquered death, and he stands eternally now, the only begotten Son of God. Begotten, not created. Jesus had no beginning. Begotten because he put on that fullness of mankind on himself. So they don't understand that. And I'm going to get into some apologetics later. I kind of got sidetracked because we're supposed to be talking about the geopolitics right now. Iran and Israel. Like I said earlier, there's two different extreme opposites of the spectrum. These ultra-Muslim sympathizers and these ultra-Jewish Israeli Zionists. And I think they're both wrong. Tucker Carlson has disappointed me a little bit because he's still just too sympathetic to Islam. I mean, I think, and then Nick Plantis just outright supporting the Iranian regime. And you don't have to support any of these regimes. You don't have to support Israel or Iran. I mean, I guess you could have a preferable outcome, I guess. But it would be like holding your nose and voting between the lesser of two evils. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised that people are picking between these two extremes, because in American politics, we always have to pick between two bad choices. Usually it's between the Republicans or Democrats, unfortunately. So I think the Iranian regime is a dictatorship. I think they slaughter thousands of Christians every year, and they should not be considered an ally of Christians or Christianity. At the same time, what this war is showing us is how Israel drags us into conflict based on their control they have over politicians. It's no longer to say that the Jewish people have a dangerous stranglehold on American society, whether it's through finance or the government. It's no longer controversial to say that because we see it happening in real life, unfortunately. You see people like Laura Loomer, who's a ultra-Zionist, who's trying to drag America into this war. Now, kudos to Trump. It doesn't appear like he's going to get us into a full-fledged war against Iran. They've recently today, or not today, but yesterday, I think. It's either yesterday or the day before, but this is very recently, where they agreed to a 2-week ceasefire. And it seems like both sides are coming to the table. Against Israel's wishes, of course, because Benjamin Netanyahu is a dangerous and deranged war criminal who wants to continue to firebomb the Middle East. This is who this guy is. He should be in jail. I can't stand this guy. And he's considered a war criminal even in his own country, so that should just tell you something. We shouldn't allow Benjamin Netanyahu, or Israel for that matter, to control anything we do. We should be truly American first, not Israel first. And that's the most frustrating part of this administration thus far, is because we didn't vote for this. We voted for mass deportations. We voted to put Americans first. We didn't We voted to end endless wars. We voted against the military-industrial complex. We voted against Jewish lobbying. And unfortunately, we're getting absolutely none of this. You have to fix the problems here at home before you can start trying to build an empire abroad. And that's what we are not doing. We're not fixing the problems here at home. So, and I think in the future, when all these neocons, boomers, they're going to die out. And in the future, all the politicians are going to start sounding like James Fishback. And it's going to be great. Because we're going to truly have an America First movement that is actually grassroots. We're going to be able to cross the Rubicon and win. I want to win. So, that's the latest on the Iran-Israel war update. Apparently, we are going to try to make peace with Iran. We could see the Trump administration start distancing itself from Israel, which would be a welcome surprise to me and to others, I'm sure. It's clear that Israel does not want peace. They want to continue to firebomb and destroy all these Muslim nations in order to push all these Muslim refugees to the West, like they have always done, unfortunately. But Israel does not have to have our support. I think we need to take our hands completely off the Middle East and tell Israel they can defend themselves, but anything you do, we're not going to be responsible for. We're tired of carrying you. We're tired of getting sidetracked and pulled into these wars and putting our soldiers on the line for a Rothschild created state that was created in 1948 by people like the Rothschilds and Jacob Herzl, or Theodore Herzl, I think it was his name. And I think this speaks to the issue that we have within the Protestant movement, within the Baptists as well. This problem of dispensationalism, it inevitably leads you into Zionism, because it falls into the error that thinking that the Israel of the Bible is the same Israel that exists today. That's not the same thing. Clearly, I mean, the Rothschilds created this Israel state in 1948. This is not the Israel of the Bible that we're called to support. The Israel of the Bible, the Old Covenant, was fulfilled in the New Covenant. Therefore, the Israel of the Bible were people who follow God. Jesus is God. Therefore, Israel is always going to be considered those who follow Jesus Christ, the Christians. We are Israel. We are the elect. Not the Jews over there who think that Jesus is a heretic who's burning in hell. And I find it ironic how people who've gotten suckered into this Zionist movement, people who should know better, people like James White and Douglas Wilson, they hate the Catholic Church to the point where they never want to ally with the Catholic Church on anything, where they hate them. But yet they're going to partner with all these Jews who reject Jesus altogether. It doesn't make sense to me. And that's not the type of Christian nationalism we need in America. And that's why Douglas Wilson is losing support, because people are not listening to him. They're listening to Joe Webb and Del Partridge and others. So that's the only geopolitical topic I'm going to talk about today. I could talk about others, but man, that would be a long video, because we're already at 14 minutes and I've only covered 2 points that I have in my notes. So the next one is going to be shorter, probably. Del Partridge has stirred up a firestorm, as he always does, because he is this base, Christ-following man, pastor, who doesn't stand for this nonsense that we see with Zionists and dispensationalists and feminism. In a Christian world where so many men have just fallen into the trap of trying to appease these feminists and these woke retards, Del Partridge stands against all that, which is great. And he has recently came out against the idea of female leadership in politics. And I don't have the exact tweet, but I can pull it up, I think. I'm going to pull out the exact tweet so I don't misquote Dale. But he said, Christian men, you are the most qualified to rule the world, not Muslims, not Hindus, not secularists, not women, you. And man, that's awesome. I completely agree as well. I mean, America was created and settled and founded by white Christian men who came from Europe, who brought the gospel here and brought industrialization here. And without their colonizing efforts, America would never have been founded as this great superpower that we are today. And so I think that the problem within the last 70, 80 years is things have progressively gotten harder. As a white man, as a man in general, I shouldn't even bring race into it, but as a man living in America, it's gotten progressively harder with the rise of feminism, the rise of this wokeness, this nonsense, this DEI, affirmative action. It's gotten to the point where you can't own a single income household anymore. We can't have our wives stay home because no one can afford it anymore. At the same time, we bring all these immigrants from all over the world and give them everything, give them welfare that allows them to outbreed us. And this is all done intentionally. It's all done in an effort to replace the native population with a bunch of immigrants who do not think, do not process, are not able to resist, as well as the native population. Because we have roots here, we have ancestral roots here, and we are not easily fooled or tricked. These politicians, they do this because they want to have a nation of a bunch of low IQ, third world people who just vote for them for no reason. They have no thoughts, original thoughts or ideas. It's easier to control people like that. It's easier to control people who think like a third world person, who don't process information, who don't have any ties to the country that they live in. That's what I'm getting at, because this would be a problem in every other country as well. This isn't just an American problem. But when you import a bunch of people who have no roots here, they don't give a damn about building America into something great. They just want what they want. Now they're going to vote for whatever politician gives them the best handouts, and right now that's the Democrats. That's exactly why the Muslims vote for Democrats, even though their conservative ideology clashes with liberal theology. It clashes. Gays and feminists get killed in Muslim countries, but they know in order to get welfare and in order to eventually conquer us, they have to vote liberal Democrat once they get into America. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that ICE is not allowed to do their jobs, that we have a president who's getting suckered into all these Israeli-backed wars when you need to start deporting millions and millions of people. There's tens of millions of people that need to be deported in America because they don't have any roots here. They don't care about America. They're just here for the handouts. They're just here to conquer us. I think if you have loyalty to Israel instead of America, you need to be deported back to Israel. I think if you're a Muslim who doesn't want to assimilate into American culture and who wants to install Sharia law, you need to be deported back to wherever you came from. I mean, that's the same way with any other religion or people that want to come here. If you're a Somalian who wants to come here and take welfare and not contribute anything to our society, then you need to be deported back to Somalia. It's a tragedy. They're doing this literally because it's easier to rule these people than it would be to rule a predominantly white Christian nation. Because we wouldn't tolerate all this nonsense, this garbage that our government is giving us. Give me 1 second. Okay. I really got sidetracked. Um, I was supposed to be talking about Del Partridge and the problem of female leaders. So there are some female leaders, political leaders, who I do like, but we need to remember that they're in that position only because men have not stepped up, and ideally you want men in those positions. Like Japan's prime minister, she's a female, but she's very based. However, she is more liable and more tempted to give into emotion instead of logic, because that's how women are. They're more nurturing, they're more generous and kind, and they're more emotional, emotion driven. So I think a man would be better served to be in that position. However, I think if I had to pick between a right wing woman and a left wing male, I would have to pick between the right wing female. Just because I'm trying to save our country. So it's kind of complicated. I have a general view that women don't believe in that women don't belong in politics, like they shouldn't be there. But just because I don't think they should be there doesn't mean I should denounce or hate all the women, that the right wing women that I like that are in those positions already. I mean, there's a difference between how it should be versus the reality of the situation as it is. So I get what Del Partridge is saying, and I agree with it, that we should be the ones leading, not women, and that's all he's saying. And you have all these people, even Christians, who are turning against him and saying, "Oh, you're such a sexist man," and of course I shared this in one of the Christian singles groups I'm in, and I get called sexist too, which, I mean, you can call me anything you want these days. It doesn't matter to me. I've been numb to it at this point. I mean, if you get called Nazi a million times a day, you're not going to care anymore about being called a Nazi. You're just not. And the Bible, it teaches a very, very strong message, an overarching message that men are to be leaders. You look through the book of Isaiah, I think, where it talks about the curse that is female leadership and how women ruling over you is a sign of the curse of God. In the same way that having a wicked male leader would be. Because women are not made to be in these positions, generally speaking. And women lose a lot of their beauty when they get suckered into having all these political positions and views, and when they run for office and stuff, and it just ruins femininity. It ruins the idea of what a female should be. I mean, no guy in the right mind, I think, would want a career-driven female leader as a wife. He would want the soft, gentle, lovely woman who stays at home and takes care of the kids. And that's why guys who are rich, who have the option to get married, typically rich men don't go for other rich partners or women or wives. They go for someone who's going to stay home and be gentle and loving and love and nice. So men like nice, lovely, humble girls who stay home. And anyone who has a problem with what Del Partridge says, you're just revealing yourself as not to be nice and lovely, and you don't have a clear understanding of the gender roles set in the Bible, where men are to be leaders, women are to be submitting under men's leadership. And you definitely would have had a problem with Paul's presentation of gender roles in the epistles. You would have really hated 1 Timothy 3:12 and Titus 2 and other passages like that. And so I think Del Partridge is right, generally speaking, although we do have to play the hand that we're dealt and support and in the cases that we have to pick between a Christian right-wing woman and a secular left-wing male, we do have to play the game and vote for the right wing woman, even though generally speaking, it's not what we want. I hope that's clear with um, what I'm talking about. I think I hope that's clear. I hope I'm not sounding like a hypocrite, because I know it can be misconstrued that way. But if I was unclear on this, please leave me a comment below, and I'll try to talk about it more, either through a comment or another upload or something like that. So, Easter was this weekend. It was a great, well, it's Thursday now, so Easter was last weekend. And it was great. We had a great service. I was not able to go to the Good Friday service last week with my church, but I did go to Easter Sunday, and we heard one of probably the best Easter sermon I've ever heard. If you haven't heard my pastors preach before, I highly recommend it. It's called Hunsinger Lane Baptist Church. I think they have a YouTube channel. You can go on there and look at the uploads that they upload. I would highly suggest watching the last sermon about Easter Sunday. And I'm going to try to summarize his ideas. I'm not going to be as brilliantly spoken as he is, obviously. But I'm going to try to summarize what he was talking about. So the point of the sermon is that Jesus had to have been raised from the grave, because that is the truth. That's not just something that we want to be true. Jesus' resurrection is the truth that actually happened. And how can we know it happened? Well, because the ancient Jews, the ancient Roman pagans who resisted and hated Christianity, they were never able to find a reasonable explanation to explain the fact that they could not find Jesus' body. None of the Christian agitators, the Christian haters, ever found an excuse to excuse the empty tomb. They couldn't explain it. They never could explain it. They killed the apostles. I believe most of them were in Jewish or Roman pagan hands, and they did not give up their faith. They all died for what they believed in, and that's an testament to the truth of the gospel, because why would they die for something they knew that was a lie? So the lie that was spread by the Jews and the pagans at the time of Jesus is that the disciples stole Jesus' body. Why doesn't that make sense? Because it doesn't make sense for a couple of reasons. The penalty for such a oversight would have been execution by the Roman officials. But according to the story that you read in Matthew 28, the Jews paid off the Roman governor, in order to perpetuate this lie, this conspiracy, basically. And they kept the soldiers out of trouble. But even if they believed that the Roman guards were asleep, there's still logical fallacies in that, because if the Roman guards were asleep, how do they know the disciples stole the body? And you're going to tell me that the disciples, 12 of them plus, 2 females, were able to sneak up behind this tomb while you were sleeping, mind you, and then roll this 1,000, maybe 2,000 pound rock out of the way, and you stayed asleep throughout that entire thing? You're telling me that doesn't make sense, and it never makes sense. None of the excuses that the modern day atheists and Christ haters have to explain away the empty tomb ever makes sense. There's the idea that the swoon theory, that Jesus did not really die. So that doesn't make sense either, because the Romans had a perfect track record of killing everyone they crucified. So this would be literally the only time in history where the Roman crucifixion did not kill somebody. And then, they put him in a tomb, and at any point, they just were not able to tell if he was alive or dead. That doesn't make sense either. The Roman executioners were not dumb. Okay, and even if this theory was right, Jesus would have still died somewhere. And they would have been able to produce his body. The Romans and the Jews had complete power and dominance over that area for decades, and they were never able to find Jesus' body in order to debunk Christianity, despite them having every motivation to do so. All you had to do is provide Jesus' body, and Christianity would have been dead right there in the water. But they couldn't do it. So instead, the Jews and the pagans, they persecuted the Christians, trying to literally kill them off by force. And it didn't work, of course, which is why I'm standing here as a Christian, and why there's 2 billion of us in the world today. And that stands as a testament to the truthfulness of the gospel itself. So there's no reasonable explanation to the fact that the tomb was empty. There are some secular atheists out there who think that Jesus never existed to begin with, but there's other historical documents, the Gospels itself, of course. There's been other historical writings from like Josephus that talks about Jesus, him being a real person who was actually literally crucified. So the burden of proof is on the secularists to find a reasonable explanation to deny the empty tomb, and they just can't do it. Just like the burden of proof was on the Jewish leaders, the Jewish rulers, and the Roman pagans that rule over that area to find Jesus' body, and they couldn't do it either. Christianity survives because it is the truth, because Jesus is the way, and Jesus truly rose from the grave 3 days later, conquering death, providing redemption to us all. So that's why Jesus had to have been raised, because there's no other reasonable explanation otherwise to counter it. You would have to fall into the very small minority of secularists out there who don't believe that Jesus existed, and you would have to deny all the historical writings to do that. There's been more historical proof for Jesus' existence than there have been many or most Roman emperors. So you would be in an arena where you have to pretty much deny a lot of ancient history. Either that, or you have to question if it actually happened. You would have to start questioning if the Roman Emperor Tiberius was actually real, or if maybe they're and all sorts of stuff. You wouldn't be able to trust ancient history at all, pretty much, is what I'm trying to say. And doing so would be unbelievably dumb. And it's a foolish. That's why most historians, even the atheists, they do have to admit that Jesus existed. Even when doing so, they have no explanation for the empty tomb either. So I wouldn't follow Christianity unless I was certain it was the truth. But I've become more certain in the truthfulness of the gospel since I've been here at seminary. The more I've learned about the Bible, the more it makes sense. The more I've talked with people who are not Christian, predominantly Muslims, the more I know my faith makes way more sense. And the more I just dive into scripture in my church, the more I understand that the Bible is real, and that Jesus is truly risen from the grave. And because Jesus is risen, we have hope for the future. We have true hope. We have hope that Jesus defeated death, that we are not slaves to death, and we have that future hope of being resurrected with him. And that's beautiful. It tells us that in the end, good will win. And despite what you've been through on earth, there is a light at the tunnel. There is a purpose. Christ is that purpose. So, I have 3 more things to talk about. The issue of Jesus' ethnicity always comes up for some reason. There was this black theologian. I can't remember his name. It's not Vadi Bakum. It was. I shared his post a long time ago, but he basically said it doesn't matter what Jesus' ethnicity is, and I fall into that category as well. A lot of people, they have this image that Jesus had to be Jewish for some reason, but the word Arab means mixed, and there was a mix of people that lived in the Israeli region. There was Greeks. There was Greeks. Um, there was there's evidence that Jesus wasn't as dark skinned or brown skinned as people in the postmodern world think. I mean, I'm not even going to mention the Shroud of Turin because it's more of a Catholic thing, even though I think that the Shroud of Turin might actually be real. I think it might be. I'm not certain. But if we look at Pilate's letters, how Jesus is described, he describes him as being more white skinned, more light skinned, as he put it. But I don't think that Jesus would have been. We can't say that Jesus was Jewish, though. Jesus was not Jewish because he didn't follow Judaism as the Pharisees and Sadducees followed it. Clearly, he was the enemy of the Jewish leaders. And Jesus' worldview, it kind of shook up the Jewish leadership. The Pharisees and Sadducees, almost all the Jews, they hated him. So, I mean, he followed a lot of the Jewish customs. So, I think we can say from certain points that he's has ties to Jewish ethnicity or culture because he lived in that area. But Jesus is the perfect fulfillment of the Old Testament and New Testament, and this is one of the things that Zionists and dispensationalists get wrong all the time. But basically, no, Jesus, we can't say was Jewish. At least not in a religious ideological, theological standpoint. Because the Jews rejected him. It says very clearly the Jews handed him over to Pilate to be executed, and Pilate tried to wash his hand. He washed his hands of it, and the Jews shouted, "Crucify him!" regardless. So, no, Jesus wasn't Jewish. And a lot of times the people and I find it hilarious how modern day Jews, a lot of them, will say, "Well, yeah, Jesus was Jewish." Then we ask them, "Okay, well, do you believe in Christ?" And then a lot of the Jews will respond, "No, we think he's burning in hell." Like, why do you even claim Jesus then if you hate him this badly? Like, I don't understand. And Jesus' ethnicity has been used to try to support this stupid Zionist idea within the right that I think is dumb. So, no, Jesus was not Jewish. So I wrote an essay defending Young Earth, the Young Earth creationist view. My points being some of the same points I made in earlier videos, so I will try not to talk about them. But I use the fact of the matter that scientific consensus is not an absolute shoe-in explanation that is undefeatable in an argument. Scientific consensus has been found to be wrong before. The scientific consensus at one time is that the world was flat, and Galileo, a Christian, proved that wrong. So, I think we have to start with Scripture as Christians. And when you read through Genesis chapter 1, at the end of each day that God creates, it says there was evening, there was morning, there was evening. That was the first day. And then it does that pattern again and again throughout the 6 days. I don't think how can you interpret that anything as anything other than literal? And and again, I'll mention this briefly just because the evolutionists, the atheists, have painted this picture that we know for certain that the Earth is 2 billion years old, even though we don't know for certain that that's true, obviously. But they paint this picture because the way that we measure the age of the universe is so flawed. We basically say, well, hypothetically, it would take us this long to move from point A to point B. Therefore, that's how old the Earth is. It's, space and time are not the exact same thing. They're different things. If you could transport someone immediately from point A in the universe to point B, and then transport them back again, you wouldn't time travel millions of years in the future or the past. You just be at the same exact spot you were for the. I mean, time and space are not the same thing. And a lot of the evidence that we have that supposedly supports evolution is just misconstrued by your own worldview. If you have a worldview that says evolution is true, the Bible is wrong, you're going to interpret evidence differently than the Christian who interprets their evidence. For example, humans and primates look alike, or don't look alike, but we do have a lot of similarities. To the Christian, that means we have the same creator. To the evolutionist, they interpret that to mean that there's a common ancestor somewhere. Now, the lack of fossil evidence that exists between humans and apes, that just points to the idea that that evolution on a macro scale is wrong as well. So, I wrote that essay because my professor is an old Earth creationist, and hopefully he doesn't give me an F on that for disagreeing with him. I think the last thing I want to talk about is, should men be forced to marry former promiscuous women? Absolutely not. And this is going to be where I end my video. Not right now, but after I get done talking about this last point. So there was this person who uploaded their wedding picture. He's a virgin, and he married this woman who had over 100 body count or something ridiculous like that, which is absurd. I haven't always been a Christian, so I do have a past. But I couldn't imagine like sleeping with 10 different people in my lifetime. Like, how do you have 10 different friends who you trust to have your back? I mean, I struggle with having 10 friends at any given time. How would I find 10 people in my lifetime to get naked in front of? It's absurd. So, I think it's a humiliation ritual. I think it's sad to see the kind of dating world that modern day feminism has created. They've created a society where women are worshipped, where men are many times simps who simp for these women. These men who think that, who are simping so hard that despite maintaining their purity, they're willing to marry someone who hasn't. And I think, generally speaking, this is not an absolute. So every situation is different, and you don't have to do it my way all the time. But I think that, generally speaking, virgin women should be married to virgin men, and we need to encourage a system. We need to bring back the purity culture and make sure that people are saving themselves for marriage within the Christian church. Because, man, my generation's already cooked. Like, any woman that I date is probably, has a 10 plus body count, unfortunately. And I'm not looking for a virgin either, because I'm not one, unfortunately. I've shared my testimony before, but I haven't always been a Christian, and I certainly haven't always lived like it, unfortunately. I wish I had saved myself for marriage, so that's not going to be a requirement, I think, in my situation. But if I have saved myself for marriage, if I did, hypothetically speaking, I would want my wife to have saved herself for marriage as well. I think what you're looking at, it's just a humiliation ritual. It's a guy that's basically living this morally good life, who has to settle for a woman because he's afraid of being alone. And then, This isn't taking anything away from God's mercy, how He redeems people. He's certainly redeemed me from my past, but I don't know. I think the idea, the general idea is that if you the formerly promiscuous woman should marry the formerly promiscuous man, because you don't want a unequal, unyoked relationship there. And then, but well, like I said, it's this humiliation ritual. It's disgusting, and I think people need to be more ashamed, more guilty of their past when it comes to these sorts of things. Like these women who do these OnlyFans. I mean, you remain to be a temptation for so many men. Just delete your social media at that point if you've had OnlyFans before, or if you did pornography before. No one. We should live a life of repentance, and I just it's pathetic, the kind of the simp culture that the modern day feminists have built. And I pray that we can push back feminism 100 years, because feminism, first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave feminism, if they have a fourth wave feminism in the future, Lord help us all. I think it all needs to be destroyed, eradicated, reversed. We need strong men, and I think that the best thing about us living in such dark times these days is that it does create strong men, and strong men will guide the future of this country. But thank you for watching. This has been another upload of my thoughts on. Please leave your comments below. And until next time, this has been The Student Theologian.